Have you ever had a year where everything seemed to fall apart, when nothing went right, and every day felt heavier than the last? Now try to imagine a year so catastrophic, so utterly devastating, that historians across the world agree it was the single worst year to be alive in all of human history. That year was 536 AD, a date that echoes through the ages as a symbol of disaster and despair. It wasn't war, nor a sweeping plague that made this year infamous. Instead, it was something far more mysterious and unsettling. The sun itself seemed to disappear from the sky. Across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, people awoke to a world plunged into a strange, cold twilight. The days were dim, the air was chill, and the world felt unrecognizable. For a staggering 18 months, the sun barely shone at all, its light so faint that even at noon it was no brighter than a full moon on a cloudy night. Crops withered and failed, snow fell in the middle of summer, and a strange dry fog hung in the air, making it hard to breathe and harder to hope. Chroniclers from Constantinople to Ireland wrote of a world where summer never arrived, where the seasons lost all meaning, and the natural order seemed to collapse. People were terrified, convinced that the end of days had come, and that the world as they knew it was ending before their eyes. With no science or understanding to explain the endless darkness, fear and confusion spread like wildfire through villages and cities alike. This single year unleashed a wave of famine, disease, and chaos, setting off a chain reaction of suffering that would reshape societies and alter the course of history for centuries to come. 536 AD marked the beginning of the late antique Little Ice Age, a time when the world itself seemed broken and survival became a daily struggle against the unknown. The darkness crept in slowly, not with a bang, but with a fading sun. It was as if the world was being gently but inexorably plunged into an eternal twilight. In early 536, people everywhere noticed the sun's light was weak and pale, as if stuck in a permanent eclipse. The days were dim, and the nights were darker than ever. Procopius, a historian in the Eastern Roman Empire, wrote that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon. His words captured the eerie, unsettling atmosphere that pervaded the world. This wasn't just a local event. Records from Ireland to China tell the same story. The light was gone. The phenomenon was global, affecting every corner of the known world. In China, yellow dust fell from the sky, summer frosts killed crops, and famine followed. The land, once fertile and green, turned barren and lifeless. In Ireland, the failure of bread was recorded. Crops failed, and the people faced starvation. The world was united by a shared, inexplicable darkness. It was a time of fear and uncertainty, as people struggled to understand what was happening. The psychological toll was immense. People's sense of time, hope, and normalcy was shattered. The constant darkness weighed heavily on their minds and spirits. The cold was relentless, even in summer. The seasons seemed to lose their meaning, as frost covered the ground in what should have been the warmest months. Farmers couldn't plant or harvest, their livelihoods were destroyed, and communities faced the threat of famine. Sailors and travelers lost their bearings. The sun, their primary guide, was no longer reliable, making navigation treacherous. Every day felt like the end of the world. The persistent gloom and cold created an atmosphere of despair and hopelessness. The darkness and cold were a double blow, striking at the heart of civilization. Communities were left to grapple with the harsh new reality. This was not just a bad year, it was a global crisis. The scale of the disaster was unprecedented, affecting millions of lives. The world had never seen anything like it. The darkness of 536 was a profound and mysterious event that left an indelible mark on human history. Imagine looking up and seeing a sky drained of color, where the familiar blue has vanished, replaced by a heavy, unyielding gray. The world above feels distant, almost alien, as if the very atmosphere has thickened and pressed down on the earth. The sun, once a brilliant beacon, is now just a weak, bluish disk struggling to pierce the gloom. Its light is so faint that it barely casts a shadow, and the warmth we take for granted is gone. Cassiodorus in Italy described a dense, dry fog that blotted out the sun. No shadows, no warmth, just a cold, gray world. People walked the streets, wrapped in cloaks, shivering even at midday, their faces turned anxiously to the sky. The haze wasn't like normal fog, it hung high in the sky, dimming the sun but never clearing. Day after day the gloom persisted, as if the heavens themselves had closed their doors. In China, they called it yellow dust. The air was thick with particles, turning the sky a sickly shade and making it hard to breathe. Crops withered under the strange light, and people wondered if the seasons would ever return to normal. In Mesopotamia, chroniclers wrote of a sun that shone feebly for only a few hours a day. The rest of the time, the land was plunged into a dim twilight, confusing animals and people alike. The descriptions are eerily consistent: a dim sun, a persistent haze, and a world without warmth. It was as if the entire planet had been cast into a perpetual dusk, with no end in sight. This wasn't just a farmer's problem. Everyone suffered. Sailors couldn't navigate by the stars or sun, artisans struggled to work in the poor light, and travel became dangerous as familiar landmarks disappeared into the mist. The sky, once a source of wonder and order, became a symbol of fear. People gathered in small groups, whispering prayers and stories, hoping for a sign that the darkness would lift. The world felt smaller, colder, and more uncertain. Communities shrank inward, huddling together for warmth and comfort, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. The sun's disappearance was a daily reminder that something was deeply wrong. Each morning, people looked to the horizon, searching for a break in the clouds, but found only disappointment. People everywhere wondered if the light would ever return. Children asked their elders when the sun would shine again, but no one had an answer. The sky had become an oppressive ceiling, trapping humanity in a cold, endless twilight. The days blurred together, marked only by the faintest changes in the gray above. Civilization itself seemed to hang in the balance, as people everywhere waited and hoped for the return of the sun, and for the world to feel alive once more. For centuries, these stories sounded like myth, too strange to be true. Historians doubted whether the darkness of 536 was real or just legend. The answer came from an unexpected place: the ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica. Scientists drilling deep into the ice found a massive spike in sulfate particles from 536 AD, evidence of a colossal volcanic eruption. The ancient accounts were true: a volcanic veil had blotted out the sun. This discovery connected the dots between history, archaeology, and climate science. The whispers of chroniclers became a scientific fact, a reminder that nature can shape history as powerfully as any king or army. The Earth itself had changed the course of civilization. What could cause such darkness? The evidence points to a massive volcanic eruption, far beyond anything in living memory. Scientists now believe a volcano in Iceland erupted in early 536, sending ash and sulfur high into the stratosphere. The particles formed a global veil, reflecting sunlight and chilling the planet. Two more eruptions in 540 and 547 prolonged the misery, creating the late antique Little Ice Age. The eruption was hundreds of times more powerful than Mount St. Helens. For those nearby, it was apocalyptic. For the rest of the world, it was a slow, creeping disaster. Some have suggested a comet or asteroid, but the chemical evidence points to volcanoes. The Earth, in a sense, was its own worst enemy. A single eruption had plunged the world into darkness. The volcanic veil triggered a sudden, brutal drop in global temperatures, a volcanic winter. Tree rings from around the world show that 536, and the years after, were among the coldest in 2 millennia. Summer temperatures in Europe and Asia dropped by up to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Crops failed everywhere, famine spread from Ireland to China. In Scandinavia, entire villages were abandoned. The weather turned chaotic: droughts, floods, and even summer snow. Survival became a daily struggle. The weakened, starving population was hit by another disaster, the plague of Justinian in 541. Malnutrition and chaos made the pandemic even deadlier. The darkness of 536 was just the first blow in a series of calamities. The world was battered by cold, hunger, and disease. Civilization teetered on the edge. The scars of this time would last for generations. The long winter shattered societies across the globe. Empires like Byzantium and Persia, and kingdoms from Europe to China, all depended on agriculture. When the food ran out, order collapsed. Trade routes failed, economies stalled, and conflict erupted. In Europe, the crisis deepened the fragmentation after Rome's fall. In Scandinavia, up to half the population may have died or fled. Even mighty Byzantium struggled. Justinian's ambitions were derailed by famine and plague. The crisis triggered mass migrations and cultural upheaval. Norse myths of Fimbulwinter echo this trauma. The year the sun disappeared redrew the map of the world. The classical era ended, The medieval world began in the shadow of disaster. The memory of 536 faded, but its impact echoed for centuries. The late antique Little Ice Age shaped the medieval world, more local, more resilient, but also more isolated. Today, scientists use ice cores, tree rings, and ancient texts to understand how climate shocks reshape societies. The story of 536 is a warning. Our civilization too depends on a stable climate. Yet it's also a story of resilience. People adapted, survived, and rebuilt. The crisis ended one era and began another. The survivors carried the memory of darkness into the future. 536 AD connects past and present, reminding us how deeply we are linked to the forces of nature. The dust has settled, but its lessons remain. The story of 536 AD is more than a historical curiosity. It's a lesson in humility. It reminds us that the world we know can change in an instant. By piecing together ancient chronicles and scientific evidence, we've solved a 1500-year-old mystery. The volcanic veil that darkened the world connects us to our ancestors. Their fear and resilience echo in our own challenges today. The search for answers continues, uniting historians, scientists, and the curious. If you want to keep exploring the mysteries that connect us all, subscribe and join our journey through history's wormholes. The year the sun disappeared is just one chapter. Let's discover the rest together.